And the governor vetoed or took out virtually all the funding for that program, so that thousands of parents will lose child care subsidies or money. These are women, and men too, who are employed, who have gone through the CalWORKs program, got a job, and now by November 1st, unless there's money coming from the state, I know that the Democratic leaders are trying to find some short-term money, they will lose their child care on November 1st, which means they will have to probably give up their job. CalWORKs was cut too by, I think, $265 million. I think that's actually probably low. CalWORKs provides grants, among other things, and training, job training for low-income people. Why is that important to us, though? I go out my way to write about those that normally people with disabilities and advocates never write about CalWORKs or the state's free child care.
Because there's a proportional connection between poverty and disability. So children growing up in CalWORKs families have a much higher incidence of disability in their family, or likelihood that they'll work in occupations that are unorganized and dangerous, and they will acquire disabilities at a higher rate than families with higher incomes. So we have a lot of stakeholders that we never even notice. The juvenile justice system would be another one, which we probably don't work that closely with, that probably has unknown numbers of disabled children and parents that are undiagnosed because they're impoverished. Forgive me, sometimes out of my mouth comes stuff I know better, but
Yeah,
I wear many hats, and sometimes a medical model word just slips right through the lips.
well, after a couple of drinks, a lot of words will start coming into our mouths, right, tonight. I know the rest of you can really party. No, actually, it's really important to realize that, I mean, you alluded to that in terms of CalWORKs, that program, and the parents and the children, that's our community. There are thousands of children and parents with special needs, either disabilities, physical, or mental health needs, or both. If you saw the people in the CalWORKs program, and when they were at the Capitol, you would have thought we called a rally, that it was an IHSS rally. Or actually, I ran into a group of parents and kids, and I thought I called the rally. I said, what time did this start again? And they were there. That's our brothers and sisters. That's our families. And those are our allies. And we should be their ally. But guess what? Our next steps, and I'll talk about this tonight after you're all kind of sleeping at the table and I'm saying, wake up, wake up. Were we there for them when they needed us? Our definition of ally right now in this room, when we started this meeting, was what another group or person could do for us. When we leave this room, I want you to think about an ally also means what do we do for them? Because that builds not only the strength of our relationships, but it gives an investment back with why they would help us. And also, it's not like we're just giving ourselves for something that doesn't matter to us. That's our community. Don't let the state of California or the federal government ever define our community by a medical diagnosis. I've said this before. If our community is defined because someone told you, a doctor told you that you have a certain diagnosis, and they told you have a certain diagnosis, and you have Alzheimer's, but you have MS, but yours is not as serious as hers, and therefore you're not really a member of our community, or you got injured on the job, and therefore you're not even in our system. You're in workers' comp. Does that make, I know a person who is as profoundly disabled as anyone in this room, but they're not considered disabled. You know why? Because that person was injured actually in San Jose during working hours. He's from Sacramento, and he's now, because it was during working hours, he's in the workers' comp system, which, by the way, is like the biggest hellhole of state government, being next to maybe some other places. But do you consider a person who's been disabled in workers' comp, a person with disabilities, equal to you, equal to us, our allies? Which, by the way, we didn't mention that. That's on our list too. Workers' comp recipients. We don't. We don't. Go ahead. Sorry.
I'd like to address what Jenny was talking about, town hall meeting. We're making plans to co-sponsor with the senior center on in-home support service issues.
That's very good.
And so this will be coming up in how we're spending part of our money. The other thing is, frightened me, I didn't realize, my worker in the morning has childcare, and if November 1st she loses her childcare, I'm losing my worker because her little girl doesn't sleep but 2 hours at a time and all night and during the day, so she can work because someone's taking care of her child, but she won't be able to.
Yeah, actually, she could be using the CalWorks program, actually, the stage 3. Another point, we're going to have to close down in a second or two, but the next steps of this goes back to then realizing and understanding and translating. When we hear of a problem in another group that we say is our ally, then we should start questioning or asking them, how does this impact us, or what can we do to help? And then you in turn need to translate it back to our community so that they understand that there's a reason why this matters to us. There's a point if you just say, oh, this group here lost their funding and we should be worried about them. I mean, that's sort of like as good human beings, we should obviously recognize and feel sympathy for anyone who is going through a hard time. That's not the same thing as doing something on behalf of an ally, though. And that's an important distinction. One thing I was trying to say in CDCAN is I go out of my way to write information. I think that's what you're trying to do with your town hall or your local meeting, is to bring people together, and you're going to talk about IHSS. I would say one other step after that is you guys go to meetings of other groups and participate. Now, Francis was very good. Way back about 9 years ago, there was some hearings on cuts to the regional centers, and Francis was there.
Because of Bruce.
Was that? Or were you lost? You went to the wrong room?
No.
So,
You got me in. Remember, there wasn't any group.
right. And it's just kind of important to be visible, to show, to be there, and to be a presence. And that's just, it's a minor step. And you can learn things too. And you might even question. I went to a group of 100 families who their children have autism spectrum disorders. This is a couple of years ago, and Mariko Yamato was actually with me. She was an assemblywoman. And I was talking about IHSS, and I was saying IHSS. Normally I don't use acronyms, but I was just kind of just saying it. And finally, about 20 minutes into my presentation, someone raises their hand. A parent says, Marty, what are you talking about? What's IHSS? 100 families. These are all people getting services from the regional center. They all have children, some of them as profoundly disabled as anyone that you would ever meet. And they didn't know what IHSS was. And like I shouldn't have been shocked, but I realized then how even within the community that I come in contact with on a daily basis, there's that disconnect. And so I got on my way to write down in-home supportive services, what it does, and that it includes people with developmental disabilities. How many people know that 40,000 people, children and adults, in the population of in-home supportive services are people with developmental disabilities who also receive regional center services? Yeah, some of you. Your daughter? Yeah. It's important to know that connection. And how many are seniors? I mean, and how many people have mental health needs? And it's kind of identifying that and then going back to these groups to tell them, this is you too. And then we got to also learn from them. I'm sorry, Renee.
Yeah, that's right. So I guess what I wanted to say was that the adversary would really be ignorance. I mean, the people not knowing what IHSS is all about, or the disabled community is all about. And I think a lot of it has to do with, if you have a son, a daughter, a relative, chances are they do have an understanding of that versus people who don't, and trying to educate them. And, I'll say it. I'm a Republican, and I live in the North State, and but I think there's a lot of Republicans.
You want to stand up and say that?
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. No, don't.
Listen to Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity all the time. So
Okay, you didn't have to say that.
Well, what I'm saying is
And Juan Williams, right?
there's other people. There are conservatives that are very involved and very concerned about the disabled community. So
That's very important. So go back then and we'll close. I know you all want to get dressed up for tonight.
I think another group that hasn't been mentioned but might be important are the private nonprofits that work with these populations.
Very good.
I worked for Rebecca Children's Services in Gilroy for a number of years, where we were trying to do in-home support by keeping the severely emotionally disturbed children in their home and building a community around them. And in-home support services was a big part of my resources for the families and for the individual. So let's not forget them, because they're affected also by these cuts.
I think that's a really important point. One on top of that, and you got to remember, our allies can be people or organizations that philosophically we may not totally agree with, but maybe we're in the same direction, or we should be, or maybe we can get there, or we can help each other, educate each other. There are nursing homes in every one of our communities. There are, in some of our communities, there are developmental centers, which are like state hospitals, are state operated owned. How would you connect with them in terms of, I think that might be more a question of where they're allies on issues as opposed to allies in a more general sense. But remember, because some of you, your faces are kind of turning kind of like you had gas or something. Our community isn't by our choice who we define it. Our community includes people who are in nursing homes. It includes the people who work there. It includes the people who own them. And maybe you don't like it, and maybe you don't want it, but it's not your choice to just say, you're not a part of our community. You need to leave. That's not our choice. That's not the reason why we can be strong and be profoundly committed to inclusion and community integration, which doesn't mean we can then shut out someone who's a part of the community. It's kind of interesting that we preach inclusion, but only people who agree with us. Everything I've done, and I have proven that you don't lose anything by doing the right thing. And all the meetings I do, all the town hall telemeetings, all the reports I send out, I don't exclude anybody. They go to developmental center parents, it goes to nursing homes, it goes to the state legislators, it goes to the governor's office, it goes to people with disabilities on the street. All types of disabilities. And I have not lost anything in my commitment or lost any principles that I value or your respect that I also would value in doing that. Inclusion is a heavy responsibility on all of us. And sometimes it's really heavy that we have to include people that we don't like. But it also opens up the door for potential allies that we didn't realize that are there. You might be surprised there are people in nursing homes or nursing home operators or people in the developmental centers who would be very strongly supportive of IHSS. It might surprise you. Then again, maybe they wouldn't be. So, wait, I'm sorry, back there. And then we'll go to you, and then we'll close.
One of the things, my daughter's a quad from an automobile accident, and one of the ways I've encouraged her is that she has a friend who's in the nursing home, and I encourage her to visit her because their goal is for her to leave the nursing home. And I said, well, the best way you can do that is to be there. And so she goes and visits 3 times a week. They have dinner together. They harass the other members and the staff. And I said, that's your job. And don't tell them that they don't have set days. It's when they feel like it. And that's advocating keeping her healthy and keeping her set on her goal that nursing home experience is temporary.
Well, everyone has a different way of advocating. We'll go here.
I think that the allies that we need are the ones that we haven't got yet. And one of the things, I've been my daughter's advocate for 27 years, but what's important is to make sure that everybody knows what her services are. Regional Center, IHSS, SSI, you name it. A lot of friends and family don't really know. And so I explained to them, that these are the services she got. When you make your case, you're building allies, and they start to become your support wing, so to speak. And who knows what party they may, it doesn't matter.